We got this from the Daily Beast. Call Her Daddy faces backlash over propaganda Harris interview. Some fans of the hugely popular podcast are angry that the vice president did not address the devastation caused by Hurricane Helene. Interesting. Well, how many of you are you guys familiar with the Call Her Daddy podcast?
Tim looks directly at me. Yeah.
Well, you were looking at me. I don't know.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm being singled out because I'm female. I'm familiar with it. It's not one that I listen to, but it is definitely targeted at a young female audience.
So there's this clip going viral where it's basically Alex Cooper, the host, talking with a woman about, like women doing things with women that are of adult nature. And they're like, it's funny because people are saying Donald Trump declined to go on the show. And I'm like, gee, why would Donald Trump decline to go on a women's sex podcast? Could you imagine if I was like, hey, Donald Trump, I got a skateboard podcast. Do you want to come on and talk about skateboarding and Magic the Gathering? He'd be like, no. I'd be like, oh, how dare you?
Well, though he could maybe help you sell even more of those. That would be the one thing I think he could add to the equation.
I'm actually surprised Trump said no because he's like, I'll go on anything. Yeah. But, we were just talking about this in the other segment about how most people are disengaged. And so I ask you, good Sir Phil, you were saying that we're trying to get people engaged. Call Her Daddy and the podcast with Kamala is what happens when you try to get people who don't know or care what's going on engaged. They say really dumb things and then vote for really bad stuff.
Yes, I agree totally. And I don't know that I think we should be trying to get people engaged. I think we should be trying to convince people that are not engaged that they shouldn't vote. Like if you're not engaged,
like the opposite of a voter turnout campaign.
Look, man, Rock the Vote was the dumbest thing that ever happened on MTV, and they came up with like reality television.
They got Clinton elected.
They did.
So let me show you guys a clip from her podcast, and you can understand why there's a backlash. Let it begin.
I want to pose this question more to you and the Daddy Gang, but one of the biggest conversations in this year's election revolves around a woman's body.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I want to take a moment. And can we try to think of any law that gives the government the power to make a decision?
I know what you're going to ask.
About a man's body.
The Selective Service Act. Anyway, continue, Alex Cooper.
No.
Is there any law?
No.
Weren't they mandating things
Zuby
a while back?
Zuby had a really great thread where he said that, and shout out to Zuby, you guys should follow him. He said that men, I'll paraphrase, men are told the truth all the time. No one has any sympathy for men. They don't care. If a guy is overweight and ugly, they're going to say, you're short, overweight, and ugly. Yeah. We don't care about you. But women get lied to all the time by women and men. Men who are trying to hook up and women who are trying to push them out of competition or just avoid conflict. So you end up with stuff like this. Alex Cooper hosts a show where she discusses like general interest topic stuff for women, dating, sex, sexuality. Those are her words. She interviews the vice president and current Democratic candidate for the election coming up in less than a month, and she never Google searched this. And so she's got millions of listeners and millions of followers, and she may as well be drooling into the microphone. Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, voting should not be easy. Voting should not be hard, but it should not be easy. I think ballots should be blank. That's it. You can go vote. You don't need an ID, paper ballots, and they're blank. You get a blank sheet of paper and it says, write down the candidate, write the position they're running for, and that's your vote. And guess what? Every single one of Alex Cooper's listeners would go to the voting booth, look at the piece of paper, and go, I got no idea what's going on.
I can't pass this test. I'm out.
Yeah, I'm out.
I think this is an embarrassing moment, but beyond the fact that she couldn't think of the draft as something that would affect men exclusively, I think it's embarrassing that these are two women who are being sold to American girls as girl bosses, right? Alex Cooper sold her show to Spotify for something like $250 million. And she is reading scripted questions that were provided by Kamala Harris's campaign about abortion as if there were no other issues that impact women, right? She's a businesswoman. She's worth $250 million at least. Is she going to ask about capital gains tax?
It was over.
Is she going to ask about illegal immigration? No. They keep women siloed to this one issue, and it's, I think, to keep them kind of compliant and stupid.
As a podcast nerd myself, having run a podcast business, her deal was over several years, and the trick is, my friends, I'll let you in on some inside baseball. When you hear that someone scored this big contract, it's a $10 million contract. What they're not telling you is how much of that was compensation. Because the tricks they do is they'll say, here's what we're going to do. We're going to pay you $2 million a year. So you'll get over 3 years, $6 million cash. We'll put $50 million per year into advertising, Spotify, with you as a feature in it, which is a $150 million value. Thus, you have a $156 million contract. And then we're going to announce it to everybody. It makes you sound really famous and popular, and the marketing will be good for you, and you'll be in Times Square. And they go, deal. But we don't know how much money she actually got out of that deal.
But the podcast is only part of her brand. Like first, she got this whole deal with it was Barstool first, then to Spotify. I think it was on Sirius at one point. She's also built her platform as an influencer, so she makes however much money off of every brand deal. I mean, there is no doubt that this is a multimillionaire, and the only thing that she could come up to, or at least be told by the Harris campaign that women are interested in, is what? Abortion and being mad at men? Doesn't that seem like it's a disservice to all women?
So it was
what you're
her
describing,
deal.
though.
I'm sorry, her deal was $125 million over 3 years. So about 40 some odd million per year. How much of that is stock? How much of that is marketing guarantees? How much of that is in some way deferred? How much is direct compensation? How much of that is staffing? You know, it's these deals sound like they're making tons of money, but you are right. Her Instagram is $3 million. She's selling that. She's probably making, let me just do some quick math. What, $20 million, $30 million a year cash? Nah, I think she's probably doing more than 30. She might be doing $50 million a year. I don't know how much of that is going to go into her production costs and everything, but I'd imagine probably $50 million a year sounds about right.
Right, plus the merch, plus the tour. I think her wedding.
That's all of it.
And
yeah.
her wedding was featured in Vogue. I mean, like, there are tons of ways this person is making money that are not accessible to, you know, the average political podcast or something else, which is totally fine. Like, she built an empire. I just go back to the fact that, you know, normally, and I don't watch her show, but I have seen clips, she's on like a couch and wearing full sweatpants. And for Kamala Harris, she has heels on, is in some sort of stiffer chair, and is taking questions that Kamala Harris has pre-agreed to answer. To me, it's like she's not even sticking by the values that seem to build up her empire.
Hold
That's why
on.
she gets that money,
Alex
though.
Cooper said they were not pre-scripted and nothing was off limits.
I don't believe her at all. Do you believe
I do.
that?
Yeah,
I
I
don't
think
believe that.
Alex Cooper is, with all due respect, she's a savvy business person who is the best at what she does, and that is certainly not politics. So, look, I got to be honest. If I said, Phil, you've played Magic before, right? Have you kept up with Magic the Gathering?
Not lately, but
I would like you to interview the current world champion of Magic the Gathering. I'm not worried about any scandalous questions.
No.
Because you wouldn't know what scandals there are going on to even ask. You'd say things like, what are the new cards that are coming out? Is there anything I should know? What's the most valuable card right now? This all she knows, Alex Cooper, is that she wants to get an abortion. So they knew going in, they didn't need to give her any preset questions. She's going to ask about abortion and some other garbled nonsense because she doesn't fact check anything. And it's not her job to. She's a sex gossiper, you know, like sex and commentary and gossip. And I'm not trying to say that disparagingly. I'm saying she's the best at what she does, but that's her space. I mean, I'm not going to go on her show and try and school her on any of this stuff because I got no idea, right? And she's talking about women who want to go down on each other or whatever. I'm not kidding. And like, that's what she does. I'll be like, hey, that's your territory, man.
Look, and she made tons of money doing it. I mean, it's not that she has not been successful in her field. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe they just knew she wasn't going to ask anything of substance, and she was going to stick to all of the sort of basic, these impact women talking points. I just think it's a missed opportunity. I mean, if this is really, I think that I read this quote from one of the interview where she says, I just couldn't imagine an election where women's rights were a major talking point and I wasn't involved. Like, if you are the savior of women, why did you do such a bad job?
Abortion is the fifth issue. I gotta say, when Tim Walz,
Groceries is number one.
Number one, immigration and wages, like economic factors dominate. Abortion is like, what is it? What is it, like 6% or some ridiculously small number?
The only reason, excuse me, the only reason abortion does what, or they continue to talk about abortion, is because it's a fear tactic. They're trying to scare women that are, you know, generally thinking, what if I might need an abortion? That's why it goes for, you know, even women that are married or women that are, you know, in committed relationships that wouldn't have an abortion. Like, they still use it to convince them because the situation is, well, what if you needed one? What if you got?
But they never fix that problem. They never go, we're going to make it legal or illegal. It's always, Well, we'll just kind of keep it up in the air so we can use it as an election issue. We can bring more people to the polls and go, oh, they're going to take away your rights to kill your
Right,
baby.
and it's not abortion anymore. It's women's rights, which they then
Right.
tag on
Women's
to
healthcare.
everything. Right after Roe was repealed, it was or overturned. It was, well, it's not just abortion; it's the birth control pill. Oh, well, it's not just the birth control pill; it's fertility treatments. I mean, it became this ever expansive issue, which is very fear based. Like, what if you need these things? What are you going to do if they maybe take them away in the future? But again, like if this is the big women's podcast of our generation. I get that maybe you would devote a little bit of time to this, but why did you miss all the other major issues? What about all the women who are listening to you who are like, wow, Alex, you're an amazing businesswoman. I want to do that too one day. Why wouldn't you ask about the economy? Why wouldn't you ask about housing? Like,
That's one thing Kamala knows about is her small business plan. You think they would have talked about that?
Yes, her opportunity economy.
Yeah, ridiculous.
So here, pop quiz hot shots. Call Her Daddy released a segment with the Kamala Harris from the Kamala Harris interview on her show on YouTube. How many views did she get in 24 hours on her mega Kamala Harris interview?
6 million.
YouTube?
Yeah, on YouTube. You said 6 million?
Yeah.
What do you say, Phil? You're not cheating, are you?
No.
Looking up Call Her Daddy podcast.
I have not.
And subscribe.
I'm going to go with 10.
10 views? 10 million.
10 million.
Are you guys joking?
I feel like I'll give it like 100,000 maybe.
260,000.
Wow, I totally overblew that one.
All right.
Yeah.
Wow,
But that says a lot.
that's actually a good sign.
So here's the Call Her Daddy podcast, which look, I gotta say this is really
That's not the whole
interesting.
interview. That's the clip.
Is that,
over- and is that overall-
The whole interview is not up on.
Is that over all the platforms? So like
No.
Apple, Spotify?
On YouTube, a
What's that?
segment was released from the Kamala Harris interview. It's 8 minutes long. It got 260,000 views, but it's titled Vice President Kamala Harris on her channel. It's not the full thing. They put up a clip. It's really fascinating to me when I see this. I do believe that I think the podcast industry, like most industries, is fake and manipulation of stupid people by anyone who's willing to actually play that game. So Call Her Daddy has 981,000 subscribers. That's actually that's considered not a big channel on YouTube. And I'm not. And look, we have 2 million here on Timcast IRL. We're considered a medium to large. I'm not kidding. In the industry, when people are talking, it's like, oh, you're like a medium to large size. The larger podcasts have 7, 8 million or more, 10 million on YouTube. I'm not talking specifically about podcasts, but to do an interview with Kamala Harris and only get 260K in a day, that is shocking. That's actually really surprising. That's why I asked you guys.
Did they post this on X?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm just saying for YouTube because I know YouTube numbers.
Right.
Well,
X, I think it would be more
remarkably
inflated. I think I was thinking X. That would be an X number. Would be 6 million.
I assume that it would have gotten a lot of shares on like your mainstream media news.
I'm sure it
websites
did
and stuff like that.
Sure. And audio side is interesting. So I'll tell you what's really fascinating about the media industry while we're here, because I'm such a nerd on this stuff. We research it every day. We live it every single day running a podcast. What are the numbers, the ratings for top shows? Now, historically, television shows, cable shows, news shows have always released their ratings, telling you here's how many people we believe watch. On YouTube, on Instagram, on X, every single one of these platforms, they all tell you what the ratings are. It is forward-facing. Podcasts are the only systems, for whatever reason, that obfuscate their true ratings.
But you know why? Because
it's fake.
they count subscribers as automatic listeners. That's one thing. So if you subscribe to a podcast, they're like, well, they already listened to it. They subscribed to it because it went to their folder, so we call that a view.
It's very weird how the podcast industry works in that you can look at Apple Podcasts right now, and I'm gonna give you guys some deep lore right here. iTunes was the biggest in the game for a long time. Currently, YouTube has taken over as the #1 podcasting platform, which is nuts. It's kind of crazy. Spotify has just skyrocketed to second place, and iTunes has collapsed down to third place. Of the big 3 places to consume podcasts, iTunes is actually way down, which is interesting because Apple Podcasts
They kind of folded into music too, didn't they?
That's probably part of the
I think that's
problem.
part of the thing. Yeah.
well, I
Apple
can tell
Music
you,
sucks.
most people who watch our show on the audio side are listening on Apple Podcasts.
Right.
So that's why I say, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, leave us a good review because we never ask and we should. But the fascinating thing is, I think the numbers are way worse than people realize. And I think people are making assumptions about how big these shows are. What I can tell you is I don't know where we're at now, but 6 or so years ago, the number one podcast was Joe Rogan. And on the audio side, I could be totally wrong. I don't know anything about Joe. I believe it was around 1 million downloads per episode. And then the second and third were like 500, 300, and then it drops significantly from there. It's an exponential gain. The top podcast got overwhelmingly the most, and then you go down. I can tell you this. There was a point where the Tim Pool Morning Show was the 34th biggest podcast in the world. And that was when I did a show every day, no days off, and before Timcast IRL existed. How many views do you think we got per episode as the peak position number 34 in the world?
What year? What's
This is let's say 5 years ago.
5 years ago.
5 years ago. And this is when Apple was, really, really big. And Tim Pool Morning Show, which for those that don't know, it's my morning monologuing show.
Covering news and
Right. So number 34 in the world. What do you guys think per episode?
220.
220? No guesses?
I don't know.
75,000.
Wow.
75,000 views on a 2-hour show, and we were ranked number 34. And I know, because I worked with other networks, and when we did ad stuff, that some of the top 5 were getting a couple 100,000. Timcast IRL does 300 overnight. We went a Friday night. The one you have is like 350 already.
Because people love Brimcast?
People love
Is that what you're
Brimcast.
telling me?
But my point of bringing all this stuff up is the media, the corporate press, pretends that these shows are massive, and they do these deals because this is what they want people to strive for to get these big deals. And then you don't see Timcast IRL or even Daily Wire shows featured in any of these big networks, even though the Daily Wire show's audio set are massive, and Timcast IRL, right? I will say this. I got to pause. Timcast IRL is currently featured on the front on YouTube's live front page. So you go to YouTube Live, boom, Timcast IRL is playing, Tim Pool Morning Show is playing. Thank you, YouTube, for whatever reason.
That's the first time in years. I mean, this was
have
not
no-
standard for a long time.
Honestly, I don't know. What I can tell you is in the past week, people messaged us being like, hey, you guys are being featured on YouTube Live. Like, if YouTube has a default live player when you go to YouTube Live, and it's us. And I was like,
I think
shout out YouTube.
YouTube wants Alex Jones back, secretly. Maybe that's what it is. So
They made a lot of money off him.
Oh, they did. Of
course they did.
They were showing background stuff, and it was billions of views with what he was doing back in before it was, before YouTube was crazy.
But you know what happened? It was Wall Street Journal. They launched the Adpocalypse,
Right.
where they started targeting YouTube relentlessly.
Sleeping Giants.
Yes.
Yeah.
But Wall Street Journal was running these stories,
Yeah.
saying that YouTube is running ads alongside the likes of Alex Jones and other far right. The advertisers said, we don't know what you're doing or why. We don't want to be involved. And before that, advertisers were happy.
They didn't care because they were getting the numbers.
The sales were working. This is crazy. We can go back 7 years. It used to be, let's say 7 years ago. 7 years ago, you could, let's go back 10 years. 1 cent per view. You're an advertiser. You got a brand new product. You could put $1 on YouTube and get 100 views on your product. Sales were cheap to get. Then the adpocalypse happened. YouTube got attacked relentlessly, and they said, you need to delete all of these channels, namely Alex Jones. They were like, 100 million views a month? We don't want ads appearing on that, and we're going to attack you and attack your stock until you get rid of it. And this shattered YouTube inventory. YouTube used to have too many videos to advertise on, so the cost per ad was 1 cent.
Wow.
Now, if you wanted a premium position, like I want to be on CNN or whatever big
Yeah, you
network,
pay the premium.
that could be upwards of $40,
Right.
For per thousand. Sorry. Now you're not really going to get those numbers anymore because the adpocalypse wiped everything out, and YouTube started banning tons of channels, and so now you're left with what you're left with, I guess. But anyway, long story short, my point in all this is the reason why I showed the Call Her Daddy at 260K. This stuff is not popular, okay? When they put WAP and all these nasty songs where like Lil Nas X is banging the devil and stuff, and they want to tell you this is popular, it is to a certain degree, but it's artificially being inflated because they want to control the cultural narrative. So they say, the biggest podcast, it's number 1. Well, I got to tell you, if you look at Apple, Call Her Daddy is number 1. If you look at Spotify, it's, I think, number 10. I could be wrong. It could be higher than that. But on Spotify, Joe Rogan, Tucker Carlson, I think Ben Shapiro dominate the top, and Spotify has taken over for where people are getting their podcasts. So I just want to wrap that up by saying, don't believe all of this stuff is culturally dominant. It is being manufactured to convince you are the underdog and you are on the outside. When in fact, I think X shows how true things really are. Every single time I see a pollster, like there's like they'll be like, "Who are you voting for?"
Crescent clone poll. Yeah.
It's just boom, Trump, and then everyone says, "Well, it's because X is a right-wing platform."
Yeah.
Since when? Like, do you really expect me to believe that 70 million liberals quit X and 70 million conservatives joined X when Elon Musk bought it? No. Don't buy it for a second.
No, because they didn't launch an alternative. I mean, when
maybe
people,
let a couple million accounts back on.
Right. Well, when people were getting kicked off of X, obviously there's Truth Social, but we saw a rise of alternative where people were like, X is not allowing free speech. Elon Musk bought it, and I don't know of any liberals who were like, "Please join us on our alternative to."
They tried to go to Blue Sky. There was the attempt to make Mastodon a thing, which didn't work because that's too complex for your average journalist. Then there was Blue Sky, which I think was Dorsey's attempt to do a liberal Twitter or whatever. I think Threads has some viewerships or some
Oliver Darcy's
users.
on Threads.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.